Hello everyone, welcome to Down and Dirty Off-Road. I'm Larry. Today we're going to put an Apex power steering, it's a booster and cooler combination setup that I purchased from them. We're going to get that installed here on the JL diesel 37s. So everyone knows JL has some steering issues for sure. It's got an electric over hydraulic pump to run the steering, and you get bigger tires and it tends to stall out, and the other problem is it overheats and will burn up the pump. So we're going to get this installed today. Helps to improve the steering, and with the cooler keeps it from getting too hot while increasing the pressure. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so let's see what's in this box from Apex Performance Products, Park City, Utah. See what all came in here. Some hose, instructions. Do you read the instructions or not? Funny, huh? And a cooler. This is the cooler. It's supposed to make everything better. Actually, the JL itself just needs a cooler to start with. It should have had one from the factory. Alright, so we got hardware kit. Got some brackets, hose clamps, fittings. Another one here says steering boost kit. Some more instructions, warnings. So this thing comes with a gauge, actual check the boost. So you can adjust it. It has a green zone, a yellow zone, and a red zone. So my understanding is the green zone here starts at 1500, looks like it goes 2000. My understanding was from factory it's about 1300. We're not going to check it before we take it apart. This is for a gauge. And this is our adjustable pressure relief that comes with the kit. So from the factory it just has a standard preset pressure via a spring and a piston we're going to reuse once we take this apart. This one has an Allen adjuster on it, so we can, by turning this in, we'll increase your pressure. We're putting more force on the spring, so it takes more pressure to relieve, is how you build your boost. So we're using this to build the pressure up. This is an adapter for the factory line. Goes into the pump and then out to our gauge. All right, there's all our components. So let's get started. I removed two bolts here, 10 millimeter sockets. Got one right here, one right here. It's for the inner fender, so we can get this pulled out of the way. Our power steering pump, passenger side, is right behind this inner fender right here. So anyway, it's good to use some type of plastic trim tool like this. I have a whole set of them. Actually more than one set of them, but and you'll find some qualities better than others. Basically, they just have like a bar bit on them. Sometimes thinner and cheaper, I call it, is better. Can't imagine there'd be mud up inside there. Where'd that come from? I think just by getting this front half pulled down should be adequate, because the power steering pump is right here behind the center fender. And then on the other side, we'll have to do the same. Get access to the steering box. So pop out all those. That is our power steering pump right there. So I've got the inner fender. I just hooked a bungee cord into a hole, ran it through my wheel, back to a rock slider. So I just have it tied back out of the way. No need to even take the rest of it down. Like I said, the back part is difficult to work with. So this is all we need. We have plenty of access right here with this. Here's the tool I was using earlier. This is the thinner, some would say cheaper quality, but there's an advantage to this many times is being able to get it in places because of it being thicker. Because here's the thicker, same tool, but thicker material, which it makes it more difficult to get that into tight spaces or what have you. But if you need to really pry harder, like I had to on this one, was difficult to get out. The thinner tool was just bending and flexing, so I got my thicker one out and we got it popped apart. Okay, so I'm looking everything over, reading the instructions, which is for a gas motor, not a diesel. The high pressure fitting on the pump side is bolted on. It has to be removed to put this adapter in for the pressure gauge. And it is somewhat hidden behind the turbo pipe here that runs down to the intercooler. So I can kind of see it, but I want to get this somewhat out of my way so I can see better. So I'm going to remove the engine cover here. It's just 2 bolts, 10mm socket, thread it in here. If you have problems with the passenger side like I did, there's a standoff underneath of it. You need a 15mm wrench to keep it from spinning so you can get your bolt out. So take both your bolts out, lift the cover up slightly, and pull it forward towards the front of the Jeep. Because it has these 2 posts on the back. So don't lift it straight up, you'll break those off. Just want to lift it up slightly, pull it forward towards the front of the Jeep, and it'll come right out. So here's the standoff piece I was talking about. So I'd use my wrench to hold that so I could get the bolt out of it. But anyway, we actually have to remove this because this holds the pipe in place. Okay, so this is the turbo intake pipe. I'd call it more of a E-clip, C-clip, because it has a part on the back here that notches in, that also hooks in to hold on to it. So you got to release this. There's one here, there's one back here. Is the ends that are bent up. You can see it right there. So you got to release this to get the pipe off. Just get a screwdriver in there and pull on it. Pull it up to that position where it's unlocked. You can see now that there's a gap in here. So now if you release the other side, screwdriver in there and you pull this other side out. So you get both those latched back and get them to stay, which actually takes 2 hands. So it's going to be hard to do this on video, but just so you have an idea. You just pull both of these back, and that one already popped forward. So basically it takes 2 hands, but you flip them both back, they'll both lock out. And now I have both of these in the unlocked position. They're latched back. Basically, you got to do them both at the same time. So it takes 2 hands to do it. I couldn't do that on video, but at this point, the thing is completely unlocked and the hose will separate apart. So there, I've got it unlocked. So it has pushed open now. And it should just release. And it does. So it comes right off, just like that. So like I said, it's like a little spring, kind of C-shaped sort of little spring deal. Okay, now I've got this hose that runs up over the top of this turbo intake pipe, so I can't get it up out of the way as much as I want to. So it's got this little green retainer clip on here. You just unlatch it, push it back. It'll unlock. So you can pull this hose off, get it up out of the way. Once we have this up out of the way, we can get this intake pipe up out of our way better. So what I need to do is get to this lower pipe that goes down by the radiator, basically there, connect to an intercooler. That's what I really need to get out of the way, is this. So I'm just trying to get all this stuff up top, up positioned out of my way so I can flex this thing. I think I could just flex it. I don't think I'm gonna have to completely remove it. I think I can flex it enough that I can get this whole fitting put in there for the pressure gauge. All right, I'm going to put a circle around this bolt that has to be removed. And that black line right there, I'll point out with an arrow, that's actually pointing towards the back of the vehicle, is the high pressure line. It basically goes down, makes a loop, goes back towards the front of the vehicle. So this is where the adapter goes in for our pressure gauge. Now what I was looking at, per the instructions, is completely different. Because the instructions are for a gas motor, this pump is actually rotated 90 degrees from where it's currently setting. And we had this hose that we pulled up out of the way for the turbo so I could see this fitting because of it being on the top now. And my issue is to make sure the adapter and everything fits in here with the hose in place where it goes and it's not going to be rubbing. So I'm doing this step first rather than cutting all the lines and everything else, because as I looked everything over and realized it wasn't exactly the same as the instructions, that I want to make sure everything's going to work out okay. So we're going to get this gauge adapter put in here, sandwiched in between this high pressure line, put this turbo hose back on, just make sure everything fits first. So I completely assembled the gauge, hose, adapter fitting per the instructions. Just do what it says by the instructions. So I have that completely assembled. So now I'm going to pull the bolt out of the high pressure line on the pump. Instructions say to install this into the pump, and then the high pressure line into the top of this adapter and bolt it all back together with supplied bolt. Okay, so I have the adapter installed on the pump and the high pressure line stacked on top of it. We have that Allen bolt in there now, where it used to be a hex head bolt. I'll do some circles and arrows here on the video, but you can see the hose going off there would be the right side, the crimped fitting high pressure original line going off the left side there where it originally was. So we just have to tighten this bolt down and then put this hose back in place. And I just want to make sure we have clearance, that it's not going to be rubbing or anything, because the last thing you want to do is rub a hole through this hose here for the turbo. So we'll get this tightened up and put this hose back in place, and then we'll see what we have for clearance. But I just wanted to see it assembled. I couldn't record it and get my hands in there. I literally couldn't see what I was doing with my hands in there putting this together. So it is kind of a pain, but it is slipped together, O-ring sealed fittings. So you just have to get it lined up so it's not cocked, and it'll slide right together. Put the bolt in it. So everything completely back together with plenty of clearance from the turbo hose to the fitting. So I'm not concerned about that at all. Okay, not super focused. I'm having trouble getting this thing to focus, but you can see that's the bolt head right there, and that is the hose. So there's plenty of room in there. No concerns at all. All right, now as the instructions say to do, unbolt your high pressure line where it bolts up right there under the radiator. Then it says remove the brackets. So remove the bracket. I simply just took a large pair of pliers between the tang that was sticking out here and the back and bent it, pulled it back, and then used a pair of needle nose just to open it up and pull it off right there. Just take them completely off there. It's actually pretty easy to do. All right, attempting to get this cooler up in here. There's no way you're gonna get a camera in here with your hands. So anyway, what I did was I bolted the passenger bracket to the frame, stuck the cooler up through the T-nut, wedged in between the high pressure line, and now I'm going to see what it's going to take to get the driver's side on. But yeah, there's no way to have a camera in here, both my hands in here. I can't even see what I'm doing. So, let's see if we can get the other side on. Okay, so I now have the driver's side up in here. I think it'd definitely be a lot easier with two people. Trying to get all this stuff fished up in there, getting the nuts up into the frame. Everything's very tight, but it's doable. I'm not sure, maybe I should have done the opposite, put this bracket on, slid it onto the T-nut from the other side. May have been a little better off, but either way, if you're doing it by yourself, just loosely put one bracket on the frame and T-nut on the bolt, just a couple threads so you've got enough play in it, and just slide the cooler on and then come down and work on the other end. The cooler is completely installed, mounted. So the high pressure line's all installed, and I got it secured up with these metal band straps that came with it. Lubed up the O-rings and the barb fittings with power steering fluid. And we are using the Mopar electric steering pump fluid. I managed to get it from Summit. So basically we're getting ready to install these with the hose supplied. So I'll put a little bit of that power steering fluid on the inside of the hose as well. Just makes it a lot easier to install it. Okay, now we're going to throw our fittings in and then torque them. So 7 foot-pounds. So I applied a little bit of oil to the inside of the hose, just like I did already on the nipple up there. So we're going to push the hose on. This first one. Then we have our hose clamp there. We'll move that into place. So we have a hose clamped on the driver's side here on the cooler. Now I need to proceed up, and we have to cut the factory hose where there's a bit of a transition between 2 steel lines, and then we use the male-to-male nipple they supplied to connect the 2 hoses together. So this is my hose going to the cooler, driver's side. Same thing on the passenger side. I have excess cut for purpose of filling the cooler, so I have less air problems getting this going. Couldn't get this on camera because it's kind of hard getting up in here, but I got a small funnel. Basically, I just took this hose, flexed it around, stuck a small funnel in it, and filled it up with the proper fluid until it started running out. So basically put something underneath it, catch the excess, just let it run out, and that way we have that much less air to deal with when I connect these hoses. Because next thing we have to do, cut this factory hose right above the crimp fitting here, and then we'll cut this one down to the correct length, and we're going to use the double male barbed fitting that came with it and 2 hose clamps there, and we'll connect this side, then we'll go over to the other side, pull the hose off of the pump where it connects on, and install our hose on there for the cooler. Then we'll be all done, fill it up, bleed the air. So I have the new hose connected to the original factory hose there, the one I cut off right by that crimp fitting. We have them both put together, clamps on them. So this is all good to go. Driver's side over here at the steering box. Okay, so here's the hose that we ran from the cooler on the passenger side up to the pump here. See the clamp right there? Like all the other hoses, make sure you put the clamp on first and then slip it up on there and then move your clamp up onto it. This is replacing the hose that we took off that went to the steel line that wrapped around the front of the radiator there. This is the line that goes around the front of the frame rail. The one we're removing. Well, it needs to be completely taken out, the green one in the instructions. So there are bolts going into the frame on each side. And word of warning, they are long, ridiculously long, and not easy to get out if you can't get to them easily. See my tubing cutter there, cutting this tube off to get it out. And again, I did everything backwards. I'm doing this because, again, the instructions didn't include diesel. I saw a lot of differences. Just wanted to make sure it was all going to work out for me. So, passenger side. On this side, I could not get to that bolt for this bracket that held this line. This line, if you look at the instructions, and if you already done this or not, is the same as the high pressure line. It's got a little tab that hooks it together. Bent the tab out and come up on top, and just took a screwdriver, pulled on it, and basically bent the bracket out so I could get the line out of it. Okay, so I finally got all this original low pressure line out. That being the passenger side there. See the long tube one across the front. Small piece there was the driver's side. So this passenger side's a pain in the butt, and really can't get to it easily even with my small tubing cutter. So that hose goes to the pump. This loop went around the frame. Beyond me why they did it like that, but anyway, that's what makes it where you can't get it out. Because right in here is a radiator hose behind it. The way this thing is twisted bent you can't just turn it and get it out, so it had to be cut. So I ended up grabbing my cable cutters. These are for cutting large electrical cable. Is what they're really made for. So I put them on there and it was starting to cut. Couldn't get enough leverage. Bad position again because all the steering's in your way. So I slipped a couple 6-inch pieces of pipe on the handle and it snipped right through it. So if you have some of these, it's actually the fastest way to cut this tube. I didn't think about it up top where I cut the long piece out. I would have done the same thing. I would have just snipped this stuff right through. It actually cut like butter once I put a little more leverage on them handles. Been a little bit longer. So that's all I had to do. Now it's all out. Okay, now right there is the fitting that has to come out. We put our adjustable pressure relief in. So that's the next step I have to do. And you can see that hose right there is the one that I just installed. The factory line, which was just a short piece of hose here and it was all steel, ran right directly in front of that. So it was not going to be easy to get to, but now it is because this is all hose from the cooler up to the pump. So it's more flex to it and it's now out of my way. So that's why I waited to do this now. So we're going to pull that out and go by the instructions again. You reuse the tip, but put in the new adjustable and the new spring. So that's what we're doing next. So here's what I just removed. 5mm Allen. This tip is what you have to reuse, the only part we reuse. You have to put that in the spring that came with the adjuster from Apex. And then we thread this right back into where this came out of. Right there we have the new adjustable pressure relief installed. That was the last step that I had to go through, process of how I did it. So now we're going to add oil, turn the steering lock to lock multiple times, vehicle not running until we get all the air out of the system. Okay, see if any bubbles come out of there. Bubble, 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 bubble. Now I do have the tires off the ground. See a lot of bubbles in there and the level went down. We need to add some. Fill it up to max. One full steering cycle lock to lock. Went passenger to driver, back to passenger. We're gonna do that again. I'm doing this slow, turning this. You want to keep doing it basically till you don't see more bubbles or the fluid level stops going down. Now, since I filled my cooler first with the hoses plugged into each end and I filled it till it was to the top of the hose, shortest hose, which is your driver's side. Since I did that first, I'm gonna have far less air coming out and I'm gonna have to add far less fluid at this point. Second level went down a little, getting a couple more bubbles. I am now going to just start it up so I can let the pump run a few seconds and then shut it back off. All right, so I started it up and I did move the steering a little bit because this is an electric pump that supposedly doesn't run unless the steering is moved. So I started it up and just moved the steering wheel a little bit back and forth. I didn't do no lock to lock yet or anything because I want to make sure we don't have more air in it, and the fluid level did drop. We're not quite down to half between min and max now. So I can add a little more fluid. We'll go back to turning it lock to lock without it running again. So basically you just do this till you no longer get air bubbles and your fluid level does not drop. And at that point is when we will start it up and adjust for our pressure. And now I need to set my pressure. So here's where it says use two people, so one person can watch the pressure gauge, the other person turns the steering wheel. I don't have a second person today, so I'm just using an action camera and connected to my phone with it. So there's the gauge and my Osmo So I just link that to my phone so I can just watch the gauge and do this by myself. Easy peasy. And that's it. I did it just like instructions said, quarter of a turn at a time, kept checking it, and actually thought I had this camera recording. Realized it wasn't until I got the pressure set. But you can see I set it right in the middle of the green. That's where I'm gonna start off running it. We're gonna see how it does. I wanna see at this point how much better it is than what it was from the factory. So that's where we're gonna run it for now. Okay, so when you're changing out this pressure regulator from the factory preset to the new one that's adjustable, they're showing right here, it's a little spool. It says it should stay in the pump. Make sure it does. It's one of the reasons why I didn't have the camera under there with me while I was doing it, because I had a large catch pan under there to catch fluid and to make sure if this little piece fell out, it didn't hit the floor and roll away. All right, well that concludes this video of Apex Designs steering booster and cooler. Wasn't a bad installation. It does take some time. The worst part I think is trying to get the cooler mounted with one person. It was a bit difficult. The brackets the way they are, T-slots, all that kind of. It was a little bit more of a struggle than what I thought it should be, but other than that, it went really well. Actually took me about 6 hours, I'd say, total time. A little bit is that I did things kind of backwards because I have the diesel. The instructions show for gas. I just wanted to make sure everything was going to work out before I went cutting my lines. So I cut the lines last. So that caused for a little bit more time on my part because I already had the cooler in the way, and to get that low pressure line removed made it a little more difficult. So you can follow the order on the directions if you have a diesel. Now if you watch this, you'll see that everything fit, everything worked. Took it for a drive. I can definitely tell the difference just driving it. I haven't gone wheeling with it yet. We'll do that next. Maybe we'll do a follow-up video after doing some wheeling. See how much it actually helps in rocks, which is mainly where I go. Doing the rock crawling thing where it tends to, steering will stall on you. Factory steering tends to stall on you. So, see how it works out. All right, well, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for watching. Take care. Appreciate y'all. Thank you.